Introduction. It's 2020, and I'm unpacking my life again. Sitting in my new living room on the floor, newly separated, only hours into my new space, I find myself crying while I wait for food delivery to arrive. I'm glued to my phone app for the doorbell camera that keeps notifying me someone's there at my old house. It's my ex-husband's new girlfriend, moving in beds and couches and big fluffy pillows and couch throws with her 2 kids in tow. They are a blended family now. And me? I'm single on my living room floor, surrounded by boxes and Indian food. I'm unable to stop crying. I've already been diagnosed with PTSD and ADHD, which make me think a little differently. Sometimes expansively, sometimes just like I'm spinning. Sometimes I just cry a lot. My doctor and my psychologist, 2 of the most important seats on the board of advisors of my life, have recommended I try a new medication that has methamphetamines to calm me down. Methamphetamines to calm me down. This counterintuitive conundrum of new combo of meds has me confused, because as a person in recovery, I was always told, absolutely no drugs, abstinence is key. It's a gentle reminder that I don't know everything. And it works, just like they said it would. I cheated on my psychologist and went to see another, because, for a mind like mine, more is never enough. More therapy, more workshops, more self-help books, always more. Surrounding me are boxes full of memories of my past, books and books and more books, decor items that just didn't fit in the old house, things I've always wanted to have on my wall in front of me, and a few plants. It's a museum of my past, in boxes and piles around me. That's how this book came to be. Analyzing books of my past and trying to figure out how I got to be 38 years old and living in my own space again. Only this time with little men who spend 50% of their time with me so I can take care of me the other 50%. Was rediscovering myself glamorous, like running through a valley after a yoga class? No, because there was no yoga. It was more like crawling out of a deep pit of misery as a result of my choices over a long period of time. Sober. It was a lot of staring off into space. A lot of turning seemingly nothingness into wholeness. It was time to own all of that and stand in a new truth, because truths change. It was during this time on my own that I started to do some activities again that I enjoyed, but hadn't picked up in a decade. I was eager to get outside and hike and fish and explore the Crow's Nest Pass. I rooted my path forward in a few values that guided my decision-making: adventure, exploration, and self-love. I began to love exploring and adventuring again, going solo to small towns to stop for a cappuccino or $1 books on my way to an Airbnb in a mountain town for a couple days. Most of those towns don't have an espresso machine, and the coffee is really bad. So I stuck to fizzy water as I buzzed around gravel roads to find water holes and parks. I couldn't go back to the area where I used to summer. That's where my boys go with their dad now. I needed to find my spot. I needed to find what's for me. In the old mining towns, I'm always fascinated by what's left, what's rotting, and how it feels there. Many feel eerie driving through the Rockies, as rock slides have taken out entire villages over time. While so much is lost and dead at Frank's Slide, there's life if you look carefully. That's when I found Knowings and the OwlSeek Method in the Crow's Nest Pass. That's when I started fly fishing with Al, another guide and teacher. That's when he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to get some lovin', kid." He meant that I'd hardened, gotten bitter, and a little resentful. I loved these trips on my own, and I longed for the vision to come to reality to do it with someone someday. Someone who loves being outdoors as much as I do. I went back and forth for months, hiring Al to accompany me up rivers and through forests and sit in silence and fish all day. It was the most comforting thing, and being with him for days at a time really taught me to listen and see things differently. The metaphors started appearing. The nest. The owl sees you before you see it, and you're out there seeking an answer. The answer is in the silent wisdom of the owl within. The owl and the nest are places we must go, knowing that when we get there, that little voice in essence has been waiting for us all along. I would stay in a quaint B&B where the owner and her daughter would bring me breakfast. If I was busy writing, they would bring me a meal to my room. Sitting in a room decorated with her grandma's old furniture, I would map out the courses for this thing that was coming to me, and walk the trails to rivers, small lakes, and along railroad tracks in the area. The methods in this book were downloaded to me during those years when I was back and forth, when my old life ended and I didn't know who I was, navigating in the middle of whatever was next. Every time I'd see Al, he'd ask about my life, my love life. I would tense up, either speaking with some shame of some secret hookup I didn't want my kids to know about, or talking about waiting for what I ultimately wanted to attract. It was during that time that I found myself again. I found who I was. I stepped into what I was called to do. And before that, I was being human, making mistakes, learning from failures, crying myself to sleep, living in fear, plagued with doubt and uncertainty about what was next. I found when I reflected on this method coming to me, it was never complete. No, rather each thought that came in from the world and each thought created within me was something to cross-check. I was applying it situationally and circumstantially to everything I did, cross-checking which one of the 7 data points I was in. Am I in fear? Am I not able to shift my perspective? Am I trying to control too much? Am I desiring a coexistence? When I learned how to apply knowings in OwlSeek, I became more certain of trusting myself to lead my life, co-creating with a source that's too powerful to name, that supports what I think, pray for, visualize, and strive for physically and materially. I began seeing everything that happened to me as actually being for me, and I could capture the data of my soul in a new way and learn from patterns in nature. For years I explored this book, reflecting on old text, referencing the wilderness and walking in silence to listen differently to the guided path within and what to look out for. These signs and clues from that inner whisper also provided guidance, insights, and cautions. Many people and institutions claim to have the way to this voice, many crossing in and through man to get there. I'm here to tell you that's not the way. It's in you. When we accept that these truths change, we change. We know a new path forward, a knowing. This book is not only a collection of my journal entries and lived experiences as I worked to develop a process to move from fear and pride to love and grace, but it's also a guide for accessing your inner knowing in a breath and how to carry it through your career, your relationships, your life. The Knowings Method is about who we are. Overall, we will look at knowings in terms of energy, or connecting to the natural world and metaphors, meanings, connections, and signs between ourselves and nature, the animal kingdom, or the natural world. We find this throughout history and text connecting us to lessons or stories. When learning the Knowings Method, it's important to understand that there are different feelings and emotions. At each level, we become aware of them. We can understand how to get to the next level or learn the next principle. This is not really about moving through the levels and just completing something. In fact, that won't work whatsoever. This is about learning and becoming aware of each stage, accepting that we are all of the stages, and that these spiritual principles are what guide our life and unite us. And understanding that when we become aware of this, we become aware of the nest, the sacred place where we go to reflect and heal and meditate and discern and pray and listen. When we become aware of the nest, we become aware of which one of the principles we need to work on in that moment. There's always one. The point of learning the Knowings program and understanding the flow of the method is understanding we can take our healing into our own hands and create a sacred, safe place for it. Slowly, we learn that the 3 highest principles of forgiveness, grace, and love are also co-created with a power greater than us, a source we identify when we retreat to the nest. For some, this source can be their religion or belief system, identified in doctrines and representative archetypes, and it is what they, as an organized group or community, believe and follow. These groups are comfortable getting together and following the same doctrine that may or may not have been passed down, transcribed, and translated many different times since its conception. The OwlSeek Method is a leadership program, taking us through knowing 7 spiritual principles to a life of certainty in how we lead. This is for people who want to show up and have a look where control is creating a miserable life and maybe not one to be proud of. Sometimes we identify that some of our behaviors are actually manipulative or vindictive. They come from a place of wanting retaliation or acting out vengefully. This doesn't mean we're actually taking action on our thoughts, but sometimes we catch ourselves in these destructive thoughts that keep us enslaved in this spin cycle of lower vibration, more than they help us get out of it. Having the courage to get out of this spin cycle and truly look at ourselves with a bird's eye view is where we can see where we've become stuck, where we have to trust there's a process that works. The OwlSeek Method is a process that's been tried and tested. Once we get to that place of knowing that there's a different way, we can connect and co-create with something else. So this can be a new mentor or a new method or a new way of looking at how we create strategy and how we take our ideas and turn them into plans. And we can understand that seeing the signs asking us to show up differently is about our own evolution. This evolution means that there's suddenly meaning and purpose in what we're doing, and we're acting from a place of being very intentional. We are inspired by others, and therefore, we want to inspire others. And we know we have to let go and surrender what doesn't work. We have to get to a place where we're coming out of the bottom of the spin cycle that identifies what's keeping us down there. This is the depiction on the business card of one of the golden trees in the forest. When we get stuck, we're just one tree in the forest, and we're not seeing the golden light inside of us and knowing that we actually do stand out, and we can illuminate a new path. But we know there needs to be a complete transformation in order to do that. The golden tree on my business card has 7 lines that represent the 7 principles. Knowings is taking your power back and is who you are. OwlSeek is aligning your power and your calling and skills and is what you do. And the nest is where you reflect on who you are and what you do. But first, back to me crying on the floor of my new place surrounded by boxes. I was moving out of my ex-husband's home, the place where our 2 sons were raised and where I told him I didn't want to be married anymore. Where I walked into my house and met his new girlfriend, soulmate, before I knew she existed. Where I sat by the front window for a decade like a caged bird who couldn't figure out how to get out of the living hell that was my mind. And since I couldn't find my words and my voice to put together a plan, it was put together for me. And now it was time for me to go. I felt comfortable in the leaving and changing. After decades of chaos in my life, mostly self-magnetized and self-created, I understood the value and the gift in letting go and not knowing what's next. Albeit paralyzing at times, I knew it was happening for me, not to me. And I was scared shitless, mostly walking through the world paralyzed from trying to analyze all the options in front of me. The only thing I knew how to do up until this part of my life was run away. With 2 kids, I couldn't do the one thing I knew how to do, the one thing I wanted to do. Being almost 40 years old and single, the opportunities to settle were everywhere, but there was also a deep desire in me for change. There were boxes my parents left me when they moved across provinces years before that I moved from their car to the cellar storage. Never opened, I knew they were filled with old teddy bears, baseball trophies, and trading cards, Trolls and Blue Jays jerseys, and dozens of journals. Instead of pulling the books out and putting them into a pile, I opened them one by one and discovered the words I wrote to myself that had messages for me now. They started when I was 8, as a diary. The baby blue one with the pastel teddy bear on the front. The pages were translucent blue, and I wrote in pencil, never staying in the lines. My diary was full of impending rebellion, where I could tell I was writing so hard I hoped to rip the pages. I was writing swear words like, "My dad is a shithead," feeling oh so grown up. I was pushing the boundaries of society and authority in my first decade here on Earth. Through my teens, I attached to boys and drugs like false friends, learning codependency as my baseline state, and that masks were ways to connect to new people. I wrote of risky behaviors and lies to cover up all-night parties, hanging out with older people, and experimenting with chemical drugs, all before I turned 16 years old. I wrote notes to myself to focus on my education, a concept I didn't grasp until many years later, but somehow just made it through with all the lies and excuses and extensions. I didn't actually graduate high school, but I was the organizer of the year-end graduation party and the after party. I was 3 credits short and had to do correspondence courses I mailed in from a beach vacation I took to Costa Rica. I got my diploma in the mail a short time later. My early 20s were hell on earth, fueled by the ball and chain that addiction had on me. I led a completely double life. I was a daily drinker and almost daily cocaine user, and full-time university student. I was trying to get through school as a normal person, working at a local bar so I could drink while I worked, and exchanging secrets and lies for flaps of cocaine from a local organized crime group who would traffic women from the neighboring motel. It was then I saw my first dead bodies as a result of addiction and abuse, at the hands of those who only wished to profit from them. The only way to survive the fucked up double life that I was living and trying to hide from others was to drink and use and fake that I was okay. With addiction, more is never enough. You need more gambling, more porn, more escorts, more alcohol, more anorexia. I was trying to fake it and manage the cravings inside for more. It worked until it didn't work anymore. My rock bottom was a few days of living hell on the Rock in South Korea. My late 20s were learning how to grow up. I got my first degree in the mail, just like my high school diploma. I finally felt like I could be the grown-up, wise woman I've always known I was. I would explore and wonder and daydream through putting pen to paper. I've known this from a young age. I've always felt I see the world a little differently from behind my eyes and in the third eye. I love to read stories of older women, novels from the library, and biographies of gypsies and mystics and businesswomen, while watching shows I shouldn't watch and listening to the radio shows of Sex with Sue under my covers when I was too young. And I was. I learned a lot too young, quietly listening and seeing the world around me. Like when we would break into Mr. Wiener's garage with his daughters to leaf through the milk cartons and stacks of Playboy magazines he collected. He drove truck all night and slept all day. So while he was babysitting us, we would sneak into the garage and share a cigarette we stole from him, flipping through the glossy pages of naked women. We weren't even teenagers yet and had never touched a boy, but we were training our eyes and minds on how we were to show up when we did. The journals are the only place where some of my secrets live. During the time I was gathering them all together, 65 journals in total, I went through every emotion fathomable, flipping through them again. I laughed, I smirked, I felt tantric sex waves, and I cried. I ugly cried. I wailed. I felt my stomach ache and cramp, muscle memory. I felt fear and shame and humiliation alongside pages of love and charity and forgiveness and wonder of the world at large. It brought back memories that I had forgotten. I shuddered at the years of repeating patterns and behaviors and falling in and out of love over and over, and not learning terms like boundaries, codependency, and not neurotypical until later in life. I still, to this day, ask why. Why were rape and kidnapping and being held at gunpoint for sex and drugs part of my story? Why were my behaviors while I was addicted to drugs so manipulative? Why did I betray and hurt good people, really only to hold on to the hurt and pain in my body for years to come, some even to this day manifesting as struggle and pain and disease? Why has the connection to my body with these experiences I went through caused so much pain and scarring and wounding, so much that my lower abdomen looks like a battleground? Even the tattoo I convinced my parents to let me get at 16 has moved as I continued to physically grow. Why for 10 years after having my sons did my body react so harshly with pain and hemorrhage like bleeding until it was determined at 39 my uterus must go? I went to a lot of therapy with Arthur, and when I thought it was not enough, I was double or triple up the appointments with other specialists to try to fix me, knowing it wasn't what I needed, but not knowing what that might be. I was also trying to fix something. I was always trying to fix something. Fix what the inner critic was saying was so unlovable in me, highlighting what was wrong with me and how pain-filled my life was. Fix what I was avoiding in my pattern of attraction, desires, lessons, assignments, and revelations. Fix what, in the end, is a spiritual condition. I didn't know the secret to it all was coming out of the cage and looking at how I show up and moving to create space within myself I called the nest, where I was able to tune into my deepest, most sacred source of healing and wisdom and guidance, my knowings. And I wrote about it all, a lot. I wrote about confusion. I wrote through loneliness. I wrote through abandon and repeated rejection from men. I wrote about missing my dad. I wrote about disconnection from my mom. I wrote about illegal things that I was testing society's boundaries on. I wrote high as a kite, illegible words and abstract doodles after days of no sleep. I wrote through addiction and obsessive behaviors, some very bad behaviors. I wrote through abuse, hospitalizations, women's clinics, and overdoses. I wrote through law enforcement telling me they couldn't help. I wrote through being too scared to say how I felt. I could only write. I wrote through learning I had two selves, a soul self and a shadow self. I wrote through reflecting on how what I was taught was religion, not faith. I wrote to spirits and asked for signs and documented the signs and occurrences. I wrote to God. I've written hundreds of letters to God and prayers to the universe. I wrote to God or Spirit or Universe or Creator or the Divine as I changed the names for it. I wrote asking for help. I wrote new words like manifestation and consciousness and grace. I wrote about discernment and trying to figure and feel it all out. And then I changed. And then I saw life through a higher perspective. And then I felt life through a higher perspective. And then I knew there was a higher perspective. This is the knowings. From those journals, I've taken what I discovered as some recurring themes, some findings, some observations, some questions and research, and more questions. I've taken my experiences and things I've taught others and put them into collections of chapters of how to see your journey and story from a different perspective. The nest. What if there was a higher perspective to see your inner and higher self? What if you could learn about it and then do it over and over, anytime, anywhere? What if it was your birthright to tune into your breath to reset yourself? What if I could teach you that? What if I could teach you that writing about yourself to yourself is a way to tune into the part of yourself you didn't know existed? Through this place, you can experience a sense of deeper connection and knowing from within, listening to the inner wisdom we all have equal access to. What if I could teach you that you could start here, or complementing your current journey of talk therapy, counseling, or small group or self-guided inquiry into something you want to know more about, and also teach you how to connect with the right team to help you. This book is going to teach you, through my lived experiences and studies and research, how to tune into the conscious and unconscious parts of yourself and turn your negative experiences and thoughts into lessons you can see from a new perspective. See yourself and your story from a different place, applying the knowing 7 principles to move you from being stuck, paralyzed by fear in the cage where you can't make a decision, and feel uncertain and resentful and withdrawn, to a place of OwlSeek, looking within and co-creating with your higher power to transform your life into one of ease and knowings.